Welcome to another very special interview with Mr. Abed Chaudhury, a scientist in real biology and computational biology to mitigate climate change. I'm Runa Ray and your host for this session. Food and fashion are interconnected in various ways, from clothes to packaging. Land has always been in demand in competition for food and cash crops. It is estimated that small farmers, herders, and fishermen produce about 70% of the global food supply. Yet they're especially vulnerable to food insecurity, and that poverty and hunger are most acute amongst rural populations. SDG 2 speaks about ending world hunger, achieving food security, improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture. And we are here to discuss just that. Mr. Abed, thank you so much for joining us. I have a question. Yes, thank you. I have a question for you. Please tell me something about soil carbon sequestration and how does that work for climate mitigation strategy?
Thank you very much. One thing we have to remember is that starting from the Industrial Revolution to this date, much more carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxides has gone into the atmosphere than the Earth can cope with. So this is the main reason for what we call the tipping point of climate change. So what is important is that, sure, we can reduce the emission, we can change our lifestyle, we can do all kinds of things. We can stop burning fossil fuel. But that is not going to be enough because too much has gone into the atmosphere already. So we need what we call the negative emission strategy. We need to bring those gases back into the earth and render them innocuous. And in this strategy, a very powerful pathway would be soil carbon sequestration. So what that means is that bringing the CO2, let's say carbon dioxide, into the soil and store it in the soil forever and let the soil be sequestering. Turns out that the soil has the capacity to sequester, receive and sequester all the excess CO2 that has gone to the atmosphere. So this is what soil carbon sequestration means. Now the question is, how do we do it? We use the photosynthesis, which is the instrument of bringing the CO2 back into the atmosphere. As we know that the green leaves, along with sunlight, convert CO2 into sugar. And then this sugar gets released via the root into the soil. However, then the soil, there's a tendency normally in the soil for it to become unstable and go back again to some extent, not entirely. So the soil carbon sequestration is occurring all the time anyway. And what we need to do is to stabilize what comes into the soil and kind of complete the loop of storing it into the soil. So in a pragmatic sense, what soil carbon sequestration means is deploying the photosynthetic apparatus to bring the carbon dioxide into the soil and then store it for a long period of time. And this has to be done in scale, in gigaton scale. So that is the whole functional definition of what soil carbon sequestration is.
So you mean to say that this was a naturally occurring process, but because of climate change, this has gotten to be difficult, and now we have to artificially induce soil carbon sequestration, correct?
Yes, in theory, it is a natural process, but what has happened that we have caused rampant deforestation. So forest is one way of doing it. We have removed the forest cover. As you know, this year in Brazil, for the last couple of years, massive deforestation has occurred. So business as usual is not going to do the job. We have to supercharge the capacity of the plant by developing a new varieties of plants which sequesters carbon. We have to remove the disappearance of the restored carbon from the soil. And then we have to, what we call, make it recalcitrant so that it doesn't get acted upon by bacteria and goes out again as CO2. So the new soil carbon sequestration paradigm means using the photosynthesis machinery, of course, but then doing a lot more. It's a global kind of systems biology, multi-component system to make sure that the sequestered carbon is staying in the soil for a very long period.
Very interesting, because what I also read about carbon sequestration was trying to get the livestock to mimic wildlife, and that would create mulch and that would get into the soil. But I've also read from the work that you have done, where you speak about reduced tilling and the harvest crops that you have actually brought about. Could you let us know a bit about that?
Yeah, so my work is actually, there are two platforms. One is that I joined as head of scientific innovation in LoamBio 2 years ago. But since 2006, in my village in Bangladesh, I have been working on climate mitigation strategy via multi-harvest crops, for instance, as well as going back, bringing into place like Bangladesh, for instance, where traditional agriculture has slowly disappeared, and we don't have kind of climate-friendly agriculture anymore. As you know, in the Indian subcontinent, in the old days, there used to be ground cover. There are things like legumes and dhancha, and every smallholder used to have like a biodiverse small paddock where he used to grow a multiplicity of crops, and some of them were nitrogen fixing, such as dhancha. Those people, ancient people, did not know about root nodule and nitrogen fixing, but they had observed through millennia that if they had those, then the soil is in good shape. But slowly, because of modern agriculture, people have stripped away all the other ground cover crops, and now there is a monoculture, and even the biodiversity of something like rice has disappeared. So what I have been doing since 2006, and actually inspired by a movement called user-led innovation. And in fact, at MIT Sloan School of Business, there is a user-led innovation group led by Professor Eric von Hippel. So I went and gave a talk in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2006, and then started what is called to recruit user-led innovation. And that is the biology to reduce climate change, if you will, or the biology new biology to bring back biodiversity. So there, what we have done in my ancestral village and the neighboring area is that we have all brought back large number of crops which has become virtually extinct. So we used to have hundreds of rice growing in our field, and now there is only 2 or 3. So I brought back the old varieties, collected it from farmers. We brought back all the ground covers, multiple legumes, something called kashari, flax. Flax is a good ground cover, and then pea, different kinds of pea, different kind of beans. There are so many, like 50 or 60 we brought back, and we are growing them simultaneously now together with rice. And we have also reconfigured rice so that the rice doesn't have to be just plowed and planted. We made the rice plants much bigger, and also multi-harvest. So the plowing need not take place in every season. And plowing, as you know, makes this because without any ground cover and repeated plowing, this is where the greenhouse gas is released from the soil. So it's very important to make it zero till if possible, and also make crops multi-harvest or perennial if possible.
It's very interesting that you've spoken about multi-harvesting and perennial, but I could be wrong, but are these seeds genetically modified that you have brought back?
No, they're not genetically modified in the conventional way it is understood. So there is not what GMO is a kind of a acronym for genetically modified, which particularly means that new DNA has been put in through genetic engineering. So I don't do that at all. All our work is using the natural system, natural variation, whatever used to exist before. So we don't create any new crops. We only use conventional breeding.
But how is this crop made perennial?
Yeah, to make a long story short, I have been working on it for 14 years. So I had some idea on how to make crop perennial using normal breeding technique.
Very interesting.
And this year in field testing, we were successful in doing that. So this is using just usual conventional breeding.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we could have a separate technical session, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. No, I completely understand. And this is something which could be definitely beneficial to the rural farmers. And of course, like you spoke about the non-tillage which again helps in the carbon sequestration. There was another.
Yeah, so what
sorry.
we try to do, there has to be tillage in the beginning of the year, just once, to establish these crops. And then through the year, they give successively grains in case of rice. And then we also incorporate ground cover. So I think we make it almost completely no-till. On a per kilo seed that we get on that basis, tilling is reduced by 80%. So as you can imagine, by planting once, you get 5 harvests. And for the 4 successive harvests, you don't have to till at all.
I've also read about the microbial coating that you give seeds. Now that is something very interesting. Could you please tell us about it?
Yeah, so this is, you probably have seen it in the company that I work as the head of scientific innovation, LoamBio. It is described in their website, our website. We basically deploy this fungi as a way of making carbon permanent. So the plants are bringing the sequestering CO2 into simple sugar, and these fungi act on it and convert it into permanent carbon, or recalcitrant carbon, if you will. And this formulation is delivered as a seed coating. So the farmers have it coated onto the seed. Farmers plant the seed and they get a proper crop, of course. And nowadays we say they give an additional carbon crop, which is the carbon that goes into the soil as sequestered carbon.
So it's like a two-pronged effort. You have a good crop that comes, and at the same time, you're sequestering carbon into the soil.
Yes, it's a two-pronged approach. And now that there is carbon offset money, so every amount of carbon sequestered in the soil, if it is proven, then you can obtain the carbon offset money as well.
Oh, fantastic. There was another thing I wanted to ask you, Mr. Abed, and that is to do with climate smart agriculture. What do you actually mean by that?
Climate smart agriculture is a generic name for deploying agriculture in a way that leads to mitigation of climate change, or at least no destruction to the climate. So imagine if you do business as usual agriculture, you are plowing the field repeatedly, which is causing the release of the carbon dioxide. You are using inorganic fertilizers, so that leads to the release of nitrous oxide, which is another greenhouse gas. And the conventional rice planting leads to the release of methane. The cattle, methane is being released from the cattle. So we know all these 3 gases and how agriculture is contributing to it. Many people say about 25% of the greenhouse gas emission is due to agriculture. So climate smart agriculture becomes mindful of these points, points in the normal agricultural processes, which leads to these releases, and take steps appropriate to the non-release so that the release doesn't take place. And moreover, now, as I have just described to you, agriculture itself can be used for a negative mitigation to take the gas that has already gone into the atmosphere back into the soil. Agriculture can be deployed to that. So agriculture, climate smart agriculture has 2 broad strategies. One is intercept in every point of greenhouse gas release so that release is minimized. And number 2, maximize such that negative emission can be achieved through agriculture to the highest level.
No, very good. Now, is this only contained to food crops, or can it also be used with cash crops?
No, it is not contained to food crops. Anything that photosynthesize, anything that has green leaves, even you can think of cyanobacteria, green bacteria, which can be deployed in this. Beyond food crops, it could be done in the rangeland, which is just grass, or it can be done in forest where the trees can be deployed to sequester carbon. Microbes can be deployed into the tree roots to expedite this process or increase the process. So basically, you can imagine in future, I was suggesting that the urban spaces, the buildings can be covered with bacteria which photosynthesizes.
Yes.
Every spot on Earth, theoretically, we have the technology to convert into kind of a carbon sequestering spot. So this is an enormous opportunity where the old biology, the traditional conservation biology, biodiverse biology, as well as the new computational biology. Both can be simultaneously deployed in a win-win situation to achieve kind of total carbon sequestration in the biosphere.
Beautiful. It's something which is, it's almost like from a fairy tale when I speak to you. You know, these are things that this is the future, because when I was speaking to you, I was thinking that this is something all of us need to do. You know, even if you have like a small plot of land.
Yes, yes. So imagine, I mean, I think too often in the climate space, we are talking about doom and gloom. We are not talking enough about the promise of the technology. And as citizens, as smallholders, as well as big owner of land, everyone can work together because the technology is there. Technology has to be reconfigured. There is a huge opportunity, and our company, LoamBio, is a case in point. We have been able to attract very powerful funding, and everyone gotten caught up in the excitement of it, and it's very real. And similarly, if you look into Africa, for instance, Africa has 1 billion hectares of land. Africa is a tremendously big theater in which to sequester carbon. So we need to think of Africa. We need to think of Brazil, where rampant deforestation is occurring. How to convert Brazil into a not a climate bomb as in disappearance of carbon dioxide, but actually a receiver of CO2 into the soil. So, and the big countries like Russia, Ukraine, you know, those agricultural, China, India. So there's a huge, huge opportunity. And I think you talk a lot with the UN people. I think this is an international platform where all these countries need to realize the potential of soil carbon sequestration and put in place strategies, put in place opportunities, put in place a kind of an opening for LoamBio, such as our organization LoamBio, to go and work there to make these solutions possible.
Yeah, I think all the countries that you named were perfect, except that they have all these political hurdles, which makes it almost difficult for a lot of good things to happen. But hopefully in the future, these things can be sorted out by themselves.
Yeah, yeah. So we don't have. So one thing is to make our agriculture kind of climate compliant. We have to make our politics of these nations also climate compliant, because at the moment there is just a general declaration of intention, but not so much work on the ground. I think in coming years, as the pressure mounts because of the tipping point and all the Antarctica ice sheet, you know, melting and those kind of blatant scenario coming to us, I think there will be more and more pressure on these nations to make the politics climate compliant.
That's true, and hopefully spend a lot more money towards climate mitigation than, you know, the other things that they like to be involved in. But that's another discussion which we will have on a more personal scale.
Yes, of course. But I think someone like you who talk to a diverse group of people as well as the UN system, I think people have not really totally understand that the solutions are very much in hand. We can take steps. Individual people can take steps. People can take steps in their backyard. You know, in Canberra yesterday, I found this microforest, which can be done in everybody's backyard. And that's going to sequester a lot of carbon. So we need to do all this accounting. And of course, when you sequester carbon and you prove it, there is a way to monetize it. So that is also available. So people can do it out of the goodwill. People can also do it for money.
That's very true. Coming back to the previous question that I asked you, when you spoke about the rice harvest that you created, you said that you made 5 different kinds of harvests. Could you just elaborate a bit on that?
Well, about 14 years ago, I had this ad hoc idea that why shouldn't, you know, crop like wheat, rice, etc., give multiple harvests? Why should it give only one harvest? Because one harvest seems to me a tremendous waste of the resources. You do all this digging, you do all this investment, you plant, and then you just get only one harvest, and then you are stuck with the straw. And in countries like, as you know, around Delhi, they burn the straw because they want to plant wheat again. So they're under pressure, they burn it, and that is causing the major pollution around Delhi. So what I set in motion some experiments, and this is involving the farmers of my village, and we kind of worked very hard for 14 years. And now we have multi-harvest rice. So this year, our rice has given 5 consecutive harvests. It has been in the field through the whole year. So the straw that people normally burn, or the straw that just remains in the soil, causes a lot of immediate problem for replanting. We were able to convert this straw into grain-giving new plants, and the plants were coming back again and again. And this is not so strange, actually, because 10, 15,000 years ago, these grasses that we have configured to give us crops, such as rice, they used to be perennial. So the ancient people kind of genetically selected an annual or a seasonal variant out of the perennial grass. And what we have found is in Kanihati village in Bangladesh, we have found a way of going back to the ancient perenniality to some extent. We have found a way of unleashing the plant's hidden or cryptic ability to become perennial. And we have done it through natural breeding. We have not done it through GMO.
How wonderful. I hope you would be able to get this across various other countries who are in need of such technology and education and knowledge, which is very important.
Yes, very much so. So I think I worked in Africa before, in Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, etc. And one particular place also very good in agriculture is West Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Senegal, places like that. So I'm quite keen to reach out to Africa, both East Africa and West Africa, because Africa, as you know, has 1 billion hectares of land, mainly of smallholders. So I have always been very passionate for the last 20 years or so to work for the smallholders of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And Africa is one place. Asia has, to some extent, modernized agriculture and is in better shape. But Africa, we need to pay attention to Africa.
Yes, that's true. My last question to you is, when I read about your profile, I'd like people to understand the difference between real biology and computational biology and new biology, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, by real biology, I mean the biology of thousands of years, because as you know, we human beings domesticated crops about 10 to 15,000 years ago. But it looks very clear that before this formal domestication, there are thousands of years of biology going on, where crops were selected, where animals were bred to be domesticated. All our domesticated dogs, cats, etc., horses. This is a result of real biology that unfortunately no one wrote down. So we think this is just part of nature. But domesticated horse is not part of nature. It's a cause by human intervention. So I'm very much interested to understand the real biology, the deep biology of history, anthropological biology, if you want to call it that way. And then we have modern biology, starting with Darwin and Mendel, and we have the breeding, and then we have molecular biology, in which I played a significant role through my career. I actually studied chemistry and got into molecular biology. Then I became very passionate about old biology. So at the moment, simultaneously, we have the old biology and the pressing point of the old biology that we have to restore biodiversity. All the crops that our ancestors produced, where are they? We are allowing them to disappear. So we have to have a new movement to conserve the biodiversity. Number two is that we need to deploy the traditional new biology, which is the Mendelian, we call it Mendelian, Mendel-Morgan genetics, which is just crop breeding, that is going on to a large extent by farmers as well as institutional people. And then we have new biology, which is molecular biology. GMO is part of it, but the GMO, as you know, there is a robust discussion in the community about the good and bad of GMO. So we have to adhere to that debate and deploy GMO when it becomes allowed. And excitingly, there is a new biology, even newest form of biology, which is the computational biology, which is taking the genome, information of the genome, deploy artificial intelligence and machine learning into it, and kind of create a computational paradigm of biology. So this requires a new kind of people who know the old biology, but know enough computation to understand the prospect of computational biology. So in LoamBio, we have been very fortunate in having a collection of people who are very good in traditional biology as well as computational biology. And we have been able to deploy computational biology to a great effect in LoamBio. And I'm looking forward as my kind of a community work, if you will, internationally on biology. I'm hoping that in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, in particular, smallholders can also benefit from this artificial intelligence and machine learning component of biology in future.
That's very true. It's the mix of the indigenous knowledge and modern day knowledge which is the way forward and the future for all of us.
Yes,
So,
indeed.
yeah. So the discussion I had with you was fantastic. It was educative, it was important, and at the same time, it was very hopeful. It was educative because it got me to understand how carbon sequestration is actually done, what coatings can be applied to the seeds, which makes it a two-pronged effort for climate mitigation. And at the same time, people also know where their clothes and where their food comes from, and how important it is for all of us to collectively work together and ensure that we can actually carbon sequester in a backyard. So thank you so much, Mr. Abed, and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Runa.